Hey, everybody. Come on and grab a seat. Thanks for coming to our Epic Money. My name is Sam, one of the pastors here. I'm pretty thrilled about this evening. It's been a long time coming, so we've been getting it all set and ready for you. We're talking about money at like the most perfect time when everybody wants to talk about saving money, right? Like it's so perfect to talk about money at Christmas. Actually, I think it is. I think it's awesome. I'm pretty excited about that. If you haven't been to an Epic before, what you need to know is that Epics are like TED Talks. If you've ever seen a TED Talk, they are short talks on a given topic. And for our sake, it's been a chance for us to talk about topics that relate, or maybe you don't always think that they do, but they always relate to faith and our faith in Jesus. So as we talk about these things, that's going to always be central because we can't do anything apart from following Jesus, and that's especially the case with money. Following him makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense of our money lives. But this evening, I'm really excited because we have two outstanding people here to talk about money in a couple of different ways. Our first one is Todd Lowe. I'm going to invite him up here, and he is, so I don't get this right, a financial advisor at Edward Jones, and he is going to be talking about managing and investing what you might be missing. And I'm pretty excited for him to come on up here. So why don't you give him a round of applause, and we'll kick it off.
All right, anybody hear me? Yeah. Good. Well, good evening. Thanks for coming. Hopefully I don't put you to sleep. That's my goal, is to not put you to sleep, and hopefully you come out and you learn something that is of value to you. But my name's Todd Lowe, and I have been coming here since day one. We started coming here first service. And this is probably the most serious talk I've ever had while I've been up here. Tim and I, for years, some of you have been around a while, used to do a lot of dramas. Most of them were real goofy and silly, and so this is a change for me. So like Sam said, I'm here to talk about investing, talk about retirement, and the first place we should probably start is what God says about that. So I looked... A lot of places in the Bible that talk about money. God talks about money, investing, saving, those kind of things. And the first verse that I found was 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 2. My glasses on. This is a switch for me once I turn 50. On the first day of every week, each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with his income, saving it up so that when I come, no collections will have to be made. The second verse that I saw is Proverbs 21, verse 20. This verse says, "In the house of the wise are stores of choice food and oil, but a foolish man devours all he has." And the last one is Proverbs chapter 6, verse 6 through 8. "Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest. How long will you lie there, you sluggard? When will you get up from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a bandit." So it's pretty clear in here that God says that we should be preparing. We should be saving. We should be looking to the future, thinking ahead. And there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of areas in the Bible where it speaks positively about providing for oneself financially. He even says that we should save like an ant. It's very clear also in my studies and my research that God wants us to make sure that we understand what true riches are. And it's not money, it's our opportunity for eternal life, and it's also the Holy Spirit. With that said, we don't want to work forever, right? We all want to retire at some point. So I'll go through a few things that I've learned over the years, a few tips, a few ideas, and just take what you can that's going to apply to you. The first thing when you're looking at retirement is to figure out a budget. Figure out, obviously what your income is, what you're bringing in, what your household is bringing in. And then the next step is to figure out what your tithe is. Once you have that, then figure out, prioritize, and with everything else, and go from there. Obviously, you have to pay the bills, you got to put food on the table, you got to keep the lights on. And certainly saving for retirement is part of that budget planning as well. Some factors to consider. It's not real cut and dry when I talk to people or when it comes to retirement. There's different factors that I consider. For one thing, age, how long you're going to be saving, and what else coincides with the age is Social Security. Social Security is very, very important in retirement, so having a good idea of what that's going to be will be helpful when you're trying to figure this stuff out. The longer that you wait to take Social Security, the better. For instance, if you wait till you're 67 to take Social Security, you're going to get an 8% bump every year after that. If you start taking it at 62, you're going to get a pretty significant hit right out of the gate, about 35%. So that's something to figure in when you're figuring out how much you're going to need for retirement. Realistically, how much do you want and how much do you need in retirement? When you get to that point, the house is probably going to be paid off. You're not going to have as many bills, so you take that into consideration. You also want to think about statistically how long you're going to live. We all live a lot longer nowadays than we used to. When I'm planning with someone, I usually use 90, believe it or not, as the age. When I'm working with somebody, I want to make sure that they're going to have whatever their budget is that they set up. I'm going to make sure that they have that till they're 90. Another part to think about, which is not a pleasant thing to think about, is your money protected? You save your whole life, you work your butt off your whole life, you got a nice nest egg. What if something happens to you? What if you are sick? What if you're seriously injured? You're in a hospital for a long time, you're in a nursing home, or your spouse has those happen to you, or they pass away. If you're not protected with insurance or disability insurance or long-term care, whatever insurance you have is only going to last so long, and then it's going to eat through your retirement savings, and that goes pretty quickly. Also, if you pass away, who you leave behind, are they going to be able to pay the bills? Are they going to be able to make it? Are they going to be able to compensate for whatever you were bringing to the table, whatever your salary was? Are they going to be able to overcome that? By having insurance, that covers that. You can also look at trusts. There's a lot of different ways to look at that or to plan for that, but it's good to speak to somebody about that. And lastly, do you want to leave a legacy for kids, grandkids? Not everybody wants to do that. I talk to people regularly that say, my parents didn't leave me anything. I'm not going to do that for my kids either. I don't think it's necessary. That's fine. Other people do want to leave something for their kids, grandkids. Do you want to travel in retirement? Kind of look at that with your total number. And then inflation. Inflation's about 2% every year, which means things that we buy, it increases by about 2% every year. Depending on how you have your money invested, if you don't have it invested, is it going to keep up with that 2%? If it's sitting in the bank, you're not going to keep that. You're not going to keep up with it. I'm not saying don't do that. It's something to think about. But after all that bad news, talking about death, talking about all those things, it's very doable. But my job, I feel like tonight, was to talk about just thinking about these kind of things and knowing that there are solutions out there. And if you prioritize correctly, it is very doable. And when you are creating your plan, always do it in the long term, with a long-term outlook. There's no quick fixes. No matter how old you are, a long-term strategy is always the best way to do it. Investing. We've been in a bull market now for 8+ years. Stocks especially have done really, really well. Almost daily, someone will call me or they'll stop in the office and, hey, Todd, I got this buddy that told me about this great thing I can make 40%, or a stock, or flipping houses, or there's all these different things that people have ideas about that quick money schemes that they can make a lot of money quickly. And in this market, there are things out there that have been doing very, very well, especially stocks. But the thing I always want people to guard against is emotional investing. It's always best to be diversified. When stocks are up, bonds are down. Stocks, you essentially own part of a company. A bond, you're essentially a creditor to a municipality, a government, a corporation, any of those kind of things. And when stocks are up, bonds are down, and vice versa. So it's always good to have a little bit of both. That way, if one is up, you're going to make money the other way. There are obviously very good ideas out there, but the diversification thing will always save us in the end. We are going to have a market correction at some point. It could be a terrorist attack. It could be the president saying something goofy that sends the market out of whack. It could be a lot of different things, but like I said, diversification will always save the day. And diversification is not only having stocks, having bonds, those kind of things. You can also be diversified within those. Within your stocks, you can have different sectors: energy, consumer staples, commodity. You can have all kinds of different things within there. Same with bonds. You can have government. You can have municipal. You can have corporate, tax-free. You can have all kinds. So it's as best you can. It's good to try to cover everything. And also part of that diversification, depending on where you are in your life, the golden rule is always 100 minus your age is what you would want to invest in stocks or equities. So if you're 60, you're going to have 60% in bonds and 40% in stocks. And if you're 20, it's going to be 80-20. It's not completely across the board how you do it, but it is kind of a good starting point. The last and very important thing before you start investing is something that I talk to with every person that I meet. It's called a risk tolerance. I always want to know where people are at as far as risk. Some people, they'll say they're very, very risky, but when you start talking to them about it, they're not. They're very conservative. They worked hard for the money. They don't want to lose it. So I always take that into consideration. It's always something to think about. Be very honest with yourself about it and try to stick to that. If you're not an aggressive person with your money, don't go super aggressive. In conclusion, the points I wanted to get across is give to God first. Put together a budget and stick to it. Things are going to change. You're going to make more money. Things are going to happen in life, so you are going to have to adjust your budget, but definitely always stick to it as much as you can. And you do that by prioritizing. And retirement, saving for retirement is part of that. Stay away from emotional investing and be realistic. Be realistic about your goals. Be realistic about retirement, what you want to do in retirement. This may sound self-serving, but if you can, work with a financial professional. They are always aware of the changes. There's daily changes going on that will affect your retirement. Social Security is a great example. When you're getting close to retirement, definitely talk to somebody about Social Security. Every time I go to a meeting, I learn something different. I learned the other day that a spouse can actually take 50% of their spouse's Social Security even when they're both still alive, as long as one of them is of retirement age. So there's all kinds of little things about Social Security out there that can be very helpful. I truly believe that if you're faithful to God, God provides. Tammy and I, my wife, have seen this for 28 years of marriage. There's been a lot of times where we thought, boy, if we didn't tithe, geez, we could have that land that we wanted, or we could have a house, or there's all these different things that, we dream of or whatever. But God always provides. We don't feel like there's anything that we don't have or need. Things always work out. We always are blessed, I feel. Pray. Pray about your budget. Pray about retirement. Talk to God about all these things. I read this in my research, and it really struck me, and it's definitely something that I want to use. Saving is wise, and trusting God is wise. The goal is to exercise godly wisdom in providing for our needs in future years, and having enough to continue giving to others. So not only do we want to plan to save for our retirement, but we also want to make sure that we have enough to continue to give to others, because ultimately our money belongs to God. Thank you.
You have never mind. You've lost your chance to bet on this now, or try and get these golden coins. So there's a bunch of them up here. Excited to find out who it is, but I'll be looking at that in the next section here. But during that, if you could welcome to the stage Tim DeMaster, who is the title is Banking Lending Leader at First National Bank in Berlin, and he will be talking about what God says about money. So I'm looking forward to this. If you guys would welcome him to the stage, and we'll keep it moving.
All right. You got me on? All right. I'm bringing props with me. How about that today? That'd be awesome. I like Todd's information. I thought it was really good. It's interesting because Todd and I are really good friends, but we're almost completely opposite. Todd's nice and measured. He's up here, and he'd probably be like, that guy really knows what he's talking about. I'm kind of a little bit more like bouncing around, and you might be like, he might be crazy. So we're a little bit, you never know what you're going to get. But that's kind of cool. I learned two things from Todd right off the bat, that he's using a life expectancy of 90. I'm 46, so I'm now on the downhill. So that's a bonus. And I was like, that's depressing, Todd. Thank you for that. And I also realized that he doesn't want people to put money in banks, which is really depressing for me as well. So I got that going. So anyways, I'm excited to be here. My name's Tim DeMaster. I know almost all you guys in here, I think, pretty much. Like Todd, I was here at the first service, and we've been here from the beginning, so really cool. Been involved in lots of different things. Like he said, been involved in drama, also part of the leadership team here, and has been really cool to see the way RCC has changed over the years and grown. I've been in the banking industry pretty much my entire working life. So it's in the banking or finance and something, so over 20 years. And I've been really lucky. I've been able to talk to literally thousands of people over those years and kind of talking about different things, whether it's good, bad, you name it. I've seen good, bad, and ugly. And it's been really cool to be able to see some changes in some people. It's also been hard to see some people collapse the other way. But I think it's given me some pretty good perspective. One thing I want to share with you is, and I'm going to talk about 4 different perspectives tonight that I can give you regarding God and money. Sam said, Tim, we'd like you to talk on God and money, which is kind of like a big subject, I'm not going to lie. I was like, okay, let's figure it out, and we'll figure something out. But I'm about as normal as they get. That's a great question. I think I'm pretty much a normal person. So when it comes to finances, much like yourself, I have a mortgage on my house. I borrow money for cars. I've seen the ups and downs of credit cards. I argue with my wife about money sometimes. Not as much as we used to, but certainly in the past. We've certainly done that. I spend money on lots of stupid things. I certainly could, you can't even imagine some of the things I've probably spent money on over the years. It's ridiculous. And if you guys are going like this, that means you did too, and I'm sure you did. And that's okay. We're all kind of the same. We're all kind of in the same boat. But we'll talk about a number of different things tonight. So the first thing I'm going to talk to you about, and here's why I brought this on stage, is tonight I'm going to show you your paycheck. How about that? Your paycheck is 10 apples tonight. That's what your paycheck's going to be. Because we're going to talk a little bit about giving, first of all. The first thing that God does is God calls us to be generous and give. In Malachi 3:10, he says, "Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it." That's the best investment you can get. Todd was talking about return and investments. I'm going to throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there won't be enough room for it to store. That's a pretty good investment. So, he says tithe. Tithe basically means 10% of your money. So, these apples, you got 10 apples. Does anybody actually ever eat 10 apples at a time? I would doubt it. That's unlikely. When you get your paycheck, let's say it's 10 apples. Basically, God's saying, why don't you give me one of those? Why don't you give me one apple? Let's be honest. If you had 10 apples and somebody asked you for an apple, you'd probably be like, yeah, that's cool. I can hook him up with an apple, right? Is tithing that easy? Probably not so much, okay? He continues to talk about generosity in Corinthians. 2 Corinthians 9:6-8 says, "But since you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in complete earnestness, and in the love we have kindled in you, see that you also excel in this grace of giving. I'm not commanding you, but I want you to test the sincerity of your love by comparing it with the earnestness of others." Now, please be aware that no one should ever give out of guilt or anything. They never should. We should give because our heart wants to give. That's why we should give. It's just another way of worship. I know we've talked about it here at church a number of times, that giving is no different than worshiping with music and things like that. It's a part of worship. It's what you're doing. So, and just so you know, if people aren't tithing, they're in good company, because there aren't that many people tithing. I'll be honest with you. Nationally, only about normal churchgoers, normal congregation people, only about a little over 10 to 15% of people, they say, probably tithe. And I don't know, I've never considered RCC normal per se, but my guess is that we're probably pretty consistent here. I don't know that, but my guess is that's probably about where we fall as a church as well. And just so you know, that even that's rare. About 80% of Americans give money to something, whatever it is. The money they give, and the money they give is about 2% of their income. That's about typical. So they're not really willing to give a full apple, but they might give the little slice that you give to your little 2-year-old boy. You know what I mean? The little slice out of your apple that you got there for you. That they might be okay with. What's interesting is they said, it was kind of like they were talking about, like, what if people did give 10%? What if all professed Christians gave 10%? What could really happen? Well, they projected there'd be about an extra $165 billion to use in missions. So you might be like, whatever, I don't know what that does. Well, let me tell you what it does, okay? Well, it would relieve global hunger and deaths from preventable diseases in 5 years. It would eliminate illiteracy within 5 years. It would solve all the world's water and sanitation issues. It would fund all the mission work, anything going on in the world right now. And you'd still have $110 billion left over to do some additional mission work. That's just if we're going to follow what God tells us to do. Not extra, just what he tells us to do. Now, the truth is, we don't give because we don't have the money. We give because we don't trust God. That's why. You have 10 apples. You have the money. This is the money. You have it. You're choosing not to give the one to God sometimes. I'm not saying you guys could be given or whatever. I don't know. People in general. That's what I'm saying. Truth is, you give with your heart and not your wallet, because your wallet has it. Your heart is holding it back. I'll give you my personal perspective on giving. We actually started tithing shortly after we came to RCC. So it's an interesting kind of correlation. Me and my wife have been going to church in Oshkosh community for a number of years, and been involved with some different things, and you name it, and given what we wanted to give, the idea of giving, and I'm guessing that some of you have all experienced this at some point, that what are you going to give? Whatever I got left tonight, this Sunday. Come to church and whatever's left in the checkbook and you name it, and that's what it was. That's just the way it is. You know what? We were younger at the time, obviously. We had kids and we had okay jobs and making okay money. But, we had bills and all these different things, just like everybody does now, and certainly we do now too. And you just kind of gave what you could. And you tried to give a little more maybe or whatever it was, but there wasn't any model. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like, this is what we're going to do. Even though we had heard it. Shortly after we came here, our lives just, we wanted to be all in. I think that's what it comes down to. And you start trusting God with your life and the way he's guiding you and the things he's doing. And eventually you need to really be all in and trust him with your finances too. And it was hard. I'm a numbers guy. So for me to figure out 10% was like that. I was like, whoa, And because the minute you think about it, it's like, that's 10%. Of course, it's just an apple. It's no big deal. It's just an apple. But it's 10%. And I could calculate it really quick. And the truth was, when we started doing it, I knew I couldn't trust myself. I knew that there would be a way I'd work around it if I tried to, if I allowed myself just to do it. So I didn't trust myself. So what we did is I set up a separate account right away. I set up a separate account. When we get paid, 10% goes in that account. That's strictly for giving and generosity, you name it. Goes in there every time we get paid. I still have that account today. And understand that this was like the days before e-giving, when you could just be like, send it right away. It was like it needed to go somewhere. And if it didn't go there, it was going to be in the general fund of everything. I still do that today. Because the truth is, I don't trust myself. I trust God, but I don't trust myself. That's my crutch, and that's how I fix it. Do you know what I mean? And God's like, amen, Tim, that's awesome. Just so you know, lots of people will be like, well, when I make more money, I think I'll tithe. I've heard that before. I've heard that from people. I've been lucky enough that I've had a lot of conversations with people over the years about tithing. It's always kind of a fun conversation. And they'll be like, well, when things straighten out and, all that stuff, you won't. Just want to tell you, if you're not tithing when you're making little, you will not tithe when you make a lot. And God even says that in here. In Luke 16:10-11 says, one who is faithful in very little is also faithful in much. And one who is dishonest in a very little is also dishonest in much. Then you have not been faithful in the unrighteous wealth. Who will entrust you to the true riches? If God, he's probably not going to unload those beautiful riches if you're not going to trust him with your money. We focus way too much on what we give up instead of what we're trying to get back. I think that's my perspective. And what's the payoff? Proverbs 3:9, honor the Lord with your wealth, then your barns will be filled with plenty and your vats will be bursting with wine. I've heard people talk to me forever about stuff that they regret with money. I regret buying this, or I regret doing this, or I regret going there, or I regret doing this. I've never, ever, ever, 25 years of banking, finance, whatever, no one has ever come in by me and said, I regret giving away money to God or somebody else or whatever it is. Never happens. Item number 2. That one took way too long, Sam. Item number 2. That's all right. That was the long one. Don't let obstacles cover the path to generosity. Make sure you build a margin. Me and my wife were hiking a couple weeks ago. We like to hike, and we were out of town, and we went to look for a place to hike. And had never hiked there before, just found it kind of online, and we're like, okay, and it was a pretty well-marked path and things like that, but it was fall. So, fall, there's leaves everywhere. So we start hiking on the path, and there was a few signs. It's one of those places you see a sign, and it might have an arrow on it, but it was an old sign, so it kind of like was tipping, and it might have been pointing down, or instead of right or left or things like that. As we kept walking, we were walking and just covered in leaves, you know what I mean? And the trail was getting a little fuzzy, let's put it that way. The truth is, it's easy to see where you're going with your money, even when you have a budget or whatever it is that you're doing. But the minute the leaves start falling on your path, The obstacles start falling in your path, you get nervous. Now, in our case, I think about a half mile in, I was like, I think we need to turn around because I'm pretty sure we're going to get lost out here. And we were totally in an area we didn't know before. Sometimes you need to turn around. Sometimes you need to change the game. And there's a few obstacles I'll talk to you about real quick that come in the world of money. First one is debt. Fantastic. Let's talk about debt. That sounds like a good time, huh? Everybody with me? Awesome. Well, this is right up my, and I'm not going to tell you not to have debt because that's how I get paid. I don't know if you guys know that, but that's my job. So forever, this has been what's kept me employed. So debt is, but debt can be a huge obstacle and huge restriction in your life. Proverbs 22:7. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender. Awesome verse. And this is a fact. When you borrow money and you go into debt, you lose some of your freedom. I'm not saying all debt is bad. That is not what I'm saying at all. There are definitely reasons to have debt. In the Bible, there's people that owe people money, all these different things. You can see it all the time. But you always lose a piece of your freedom. It's the truth. The truth is, we look at it, at the bank, it's like, when I train people, we find it's about everything. That's what I would say. We find it's pretty much anything. That doesn't mean everything should be financed, but we do finance about everything. And when you're looking at that, I think it's kind of a needs and wants type thing that you're going to look at and things like that. The second thing I want to talk about real quick, though, is unexpected things and expenses. That's the other obstacle that I would say. You guys know what this is like, too. And this deals with Todd talked about saving. You guys, I'm sure, have heard about emergency funds, things like this, that you build a margin in is the way that I would say it. I don't know what that number is. People have different formulas, different things they can say, different financial gurus will say X, but it's different for everybody else because the truth is, your emergency fund needs to be a little bigger if you have some more of the things that I talked about before this, debt. If you have more debt, you need a bigger emergency fund. If you don't have a lot of debt, the emergency fund probably isn't quite as important. But it's definitely something you want to work on. Let's go to number 3, because I need to keep moving. I'm running out of time, aren't I, Sam? I know I am. Look forward, not backward. But don't forget your experiences. One of the things when people meet with me quite often is they're so worried about how they got to where they were, they're not thinking about how they get out. So they talk to me forever about things of, they sit down and they, and my questions, what happened, and story. And then my question is always, so what are you going to do now? Well, this happened. What are you going to do now? You got to take the first step. Recognize where you are and move forward. I think the Bible speaks to this all the time in our lives. God always wants us looking forward. Forget the past. Do not dwell on the past. It's from Isaiah 43. In Hebrews 12:1, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. You can't run the race when you're thinking about the past. You got to look towards the future. Know that you're not alone with financial struggles. There are people out there everywhere. But being stressed out is a distraction from what God wants. Lastly, don't let your financial circumstances let you miss the risk. It's interesting, Todd talked about risk, and he was talking about it in a little different fashion, about the risk that you take in your investments and things like that. God wants us to take risks. He wants us to step out with our faith. It's really hard to do when our finances are messed up. It's really hard to do. Debt, obligations, massive financial responsibilities. When God places opportunities in our life, if all those things are weighing us down, you're going to miss them. You're going to miss them because you're going to be like, I can't. I have too much. I can't. I think our lives are made up of small steps and giant leaps. Small steps can be, and small steps for one person might be totally different than a giant leap for somebody else. A small step for one person might be to start tithing. That might be a giant leap for somebody else. It could be totally different. But you're not even going to see the giant leap until you work through the small steps. I mentioned in the beginning, the first verse we did, talking about how it's the best investment ever to tithe. I was reading something and they were saying, it was talking about this concept, and it said, no one ever bet too much money on a winning horse. Now, you're gambling or whatever, you won, and you just, oh, I should have put more on it. I should have put more money on that. Well, yeah, obviously, now that you know that it won, we already know he's going to win. So do the investment. My hope for you guys is that you can find what God's will is for your life, including how to handle your finances. And if you ever want to talk to somebody, do it. Get perspective on it from somebody else. Sometimes it's easier for them to see from the outside than it is from the inside. So I wish you luck. Thanks.
The plan. This is what we need to talk about when dealing with money. What happens when things don't go according to plan? Well, I'm going to have you guys up here for a minute and talk about money-related things, but we're Christmas time right now, so I have a couple of questions for you. And I thought a good way to kick this off would be to ask the first question of, what's your one tip dealing with Christmas time? Because you have to have all this stuff you think about and dealing with money. What's your number one tip when you think about finances at Christmas? Go ahead.
I would just say budgeting, just like you ordinarily would. We figure out exactly what we're going to spend for each person on our list of who we're buying for, and then we figure that into our overall budget for the holiday, and we stick to it.
Do you do that for like the whole year, like you're budgeting all year for that, or do you like?
Yes.
Okay.
Planning ahead for Christmas, yep.
So you're a budget guy. You do a budget every month.
My wife and I together, yes.
That's awesome. All right, good to know. Tim?
So I would say that we're just okay on this. But I would say that it's important to set some limitations as far as what your idea is. You know, whether you call it budget, you can call it whatever you want, but I would say limitations as far as like, okay, we're not going to go above this and things like that. Particularly, Christmas can get crazy. I mean, you know what I mean? It can get crazy just kind of with extended people sometimes. So I think it's a matter of just limitations.
Great. All right. So setting limitations, having a budget, that's good for Christmas. And if you're at the end of the year right now and you're thinking about Christmas gifts, and you're like, oops, we haven't budgeted, my thought is like, hey, just be as practical as you can, because you only have so much. Don't overextend yourself. Don't go into debt in that way. Mm-hmm. All right. Then the second question is this. Tim, you alluded to the fact that you've had some interesting purchases. Mm-hmm. What's one mistake that you've made with money over the years that you're thinking about that you would want to share with people so that they can be all the wiser?
Well, I'd say that, you know, I've dealt with a lot of people over the years, and I think back in when I was younger and things like that, you spent a lot of things on that, money on lots of things that you didn't really know what you spent it on. And here's what I mean by that is I've had people come in by me so many times, and they'll have a ton of credit card debt, for example, and you'll ask, what did you buy to get this point? And the answer literally is, I'm really not sure. You know what I mean? And that to me is like, okay, and you can add it up and whatever it would be. And there was a time in our life when you had a bill and I was like, what did I get? Do you know what I mean? And so I don't know if it's necessarily something specific for me, but I think there's times that it can accelerate and kind of combine into something huge. So,
you know what I think the best example of that is when you use your credit card and you're buying things, and the things you're buying, like, what did I actually get with this? And then you look down and you're like, oh, a few extra pounds because I ate out every single night of the week for however long, and it's like, oh, let's just put it on the card, and it's no big deal. Anybody else experienced that? No, okay. But eating out, like, food is such a crazy thing. It just goes away. So anyways, go ahead. Oh, you have any ideas?
I wish I would have started saving sooner for the kids' college to help them out. We ended up, giving them money every semester. Instead, if we would have invested early on, it could have grown and could have had some gains on it. That's my big regret.
And that's something in general, I would say, Todd. You know, I mean, I think like when I have younger people that I work with, and they'll be like, well, I'm not sure if I'm going to get into the retirement plan. I'm like, dude, get in now. Get 40 years behind you or whatever. So,
even if it's just a little bit.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Any little bit
I think
helps.
that applies to that too.
Great. How about this question? Are you guys budget people, not budget people? What do you recommend? Do you use a certain program for it, or a certain, like a graph paper, or what? What kind of things do you use for budgeting?
I called Tim tonight because I saw your email. I'm like, what is this envelope thing? And I forgot. And it was funny, is Tammy and I have always done that. not with several envelopes, with just one envelope. We put a certain amount of cash, and that's what we have for 2 weeks for things other than bills. And we just watch that throughout the 2 weeks, and we use it accordingly based on what's left. You know, the bills are something different, but that's how we've always done it.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Great.
Thanks.
I would say that we don't have a real designated budget, but we were very aware of what we're spending money on. And I guess what I mean by that is, like, we don't make large purchases flippantly at all. And I have kind of a weird number brain anyway, like money brain. Like, you know, you go somewhere and, like, I could probably guess how much my bill is going to be, kind of weird thing. So that kind of processes all the way throughout, I think, our finances in general. So, but I've seen a million different things work for people, and I think it's different for everyone.
Absolutely.
And I think that's okay. You know what I mean? I think, you know, you're talking about the envelope stuff. Ramsey's been a big thing for people. I know that's been successful for people. I know some other people, it doesn't. They have to have the right attitude and things like that too. So
yeah. For us, it's been really helpful. We've started using this program. Art Lund, I'm calling you out. Art Lund is here, and he told me about this program called YNAB, Y-N-A-B, and it's basically just a budgeting thing, and it's online, and we use it every month. Like, we budget from what we made the previous month, and we put it away. And we don't have that money brain, so it's been super, super helpful. We've used it for like a year or two now, and it's made all the difference. So that's kind of cool. But it's just a fun little tidbit there. All right, so what's some of the best advice you guys have ever received about money? So you guys are often giving out advice. What's some of the best advice you've ever received?
go ahead.
I came from a family, my father was a banker like Tim, and it was always, don't spend what you don't have. You know, work hard, do the best you can. You know, there's nothing wrong with making a good salary, but just don't spend what you don't have. Simple as that.
Great.
Sadly, I'm not going to be anything exciting because that's pretty much what my story is. My parents are both teachers. They're real practical people. They were savers for things that they wanted to do. I think my dad was probably my best guide for that, and he was very much somebody that wouldn't buy something unless he had the money for it. So I grew up through that a little bit, and also, you know, with the stance of kind of like, if you're going to buy something larger or whatever, that you can wait and get ready for it. So.
Great. When you think about your faith, you guys both talked a lot about how your faith guides how you view your money. And I'm curious if you'd want to talk just a little bit more about that personally for each of you. How has your faith impacted your view of both money and wealth? So how has it changed it or shaped it? Or maybe when you were growing up, you had one view of it, and then having a relationship with Jesus and going to church, how has that changed it over time?
I think there's a period of time when I was younger that if you'd have told me I was giving 10% of my income to church, I would have told you were nuts. And that you were going to be generous in other areas and do all these things. I think I would have said, yeah, that's probably not going to happen. And I think for us, the blessings that we've seen since then have been crazy. And not just financial blessings, things like that, but just in your life, the way it affects you. When you put your faith completely in, do you know what I mean? Like, you're doing other things, and financially is a big piece. People hold it so tight and they hold it so serious to the things that they do, that when you give that up to God, your perspective changes. I don't know how to say it. I think, you know, and He rewards you. You do see the reward for that. I was going to say when I was talking, truthfully, I believe one of the reasons RCC is so successful is because we use the same model for missions here for the church budgeting, where we give 10% away for missions. And because of that, our church has never had financial issues, and that's really rare, right, Mike? Really rare. I mean, he talks to people all the time that churches struggle and they have to be up here banging the drum for money, which should not be something the church is doing. And that's not why we're doing Epic Money. We're doing it because it's a big thing for your faith. But God doesn't need your money. He wants your faith. He wants your trust. So,
Awesome.
long answer to.
No, that's
the
really
question,
good.
so.
That's really good.
Best thing I can say, speaking for myself, is it was a process. Like Tim said, it wasn't something that initially I thought I'd be doing, but we slowly got there, and then once we got there, it was still difficult. Like I was talking about earlier, you think about, geez, I could have this, or I could do this, or I could do that, and the longer and longer you do it, and then you get that perspective of the blessings in your life, you just don't miss it. And
I think what's cool about tithing, the other thing that your perspective you have there, is you're excited to make more money because you can give more away. And I think that's what's cool about tithing and generosity. And when you have that motif, is that you're excited about that because then you have that opportunity.
I think there's an interesting thing about investing, where when you give to something and you're invested in something, seeing the success of that thing, whether it's a church or something you're generous to, or like whatever it is, to see the success of that, you have ownership, and it's something that you love to see. You get to be part of it.
Totally.
And I think that absolutely works with what God does. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for being here. We are only 4 minutes over our allotted time, so that's pretty amazing. That's props to you guys. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate all of your insight and your thoughtfulness with talking through these things. Thank you all for being here. Hopefully you picked up a thing or two that you can apply to your life, but even more than that, I hope that what came through in all these talks is that the most important thing in all of this is our faith. Or money, or whatever topic that we've talked about at Epic, it's this thing that is a tangent part of our life. It's a part that extends out in some way, shape, or form, but whenever we draw it back to our faith in God, and we do it in a way that we follow Him, it always enriches it. It always makes it more powerful. It always makes it more positive. It loses the power over us that it often has. Money, it works that way, right? It can sometimes have this power over us. But when we trust God with it and we move forward with it, it loses that power, and it becomes this tool that can do amazing things and we can use in awesome ways. So I hope that came through, and I hope that you're encouraged to continue to seek how God wants you to use your money, and then also be able to see that there are these amazing blessings financially and very much otherwise of relationships and the things you can be a part of that are so evident when we follow God in that way. Thank you again for being here. There'll be more epics in the future. Be out on the lookout for that. And with that, there's lots of cookies and coffee back there. Grab some before you go, and hope to see you guys again.